Hi, this is Russ Walden with Father's Heart Ministry. We're going to do a Bible study today on John chapter 1, verse 2. We have a teaching at propheticnow.com on the first verse that brings out the understanding of what John was referring to when he said, "In the beginning was the Word," and he used the term logos. This teaching today is the second part, or it's a continuation, looking into verse 2, the same was in the beginning with God. Now let's read those two verses and then begin our study. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The same was in the beginning with God. Now I titled this teaching after Colossians chapter 1 verse 17 because it sums up the understanding of what the Logos implies when John calls God and then identifies Jesus as the Logos. And Colossians 1:17 says, "By him all things consist." A prophetic perspective. Verse 2 of John chapter 1, speaking of the Logos, says the same, God is the Logos. Verse 1, the same was in the beginning with God. This verse seems relatively straightforward in its understanding. It carries forward the thought from verse 1, dealing with the Logos and what the Logos is and what its origin is. And having established that God is the Logos and that Jesus is God, we go on to establish the position. Where is the Logos? If God is the Logos and the Logos is Jesus, what does that mean to us? Well, we have to understand the posture of the Logos toward us. We have to establish the position of the Logos in creation, or the relationship the Logos has to creation and to man himself. Now remember, the Logos was understood by the people that John wrote to. He wrote the Gospel of John in the city of Ephesus. In the city of Ephesus, there were schools of philosophy that followed the teachings of a man named Heraclitus, who 600 years before coined the term Logos as that unknowable something that proceeds from God and gives all things their created reality. And so he's saying that this is who God is. God did not just take an unknowable, impersonal something and allow creation to come into existence. John's making the stipulation that God did not use a sterile process to create the universe and to create man, but that he actually used the constituent component of his own person, a subtle but very profound truth. He didn't just take something, manufacture something called the Logos and establish it as that which would generate existence as we know it. No, John is saying, yes, the Logos is that which proceeds from God and gives all things its created reality, but then he said the Logos doesn't just come from God, the Logos is God. God creates and sustains the world and you personally, the world as we know it, the universe as we know it, and you personally, by an extension of himself into space and time. He didn't give us things, he gave us himself. It's a profound, now remember, this is coming from the man who laid at Jesus' breast at supper, who wanted to touch Jesus, wanted to lay his head in Jesus' shoulder. He wanted to have the tactile experience of Jesus the Christ, because he knew the heart that was beating there was the heart of God himself. So again, verse 1 stipulates that Jesus is the Logos. Remember, now if we're going to teach the Logos as a prophetic perspective, the prophetic is not Logos, the prophetic is Rhema. One way of looking at the Logos or one variation or manifestation of the Logos, is the written Word of God. The written Word of God is what the Lord has said. The Rhema is what the Lord is saying. It's the active words of God, current and specific to your situation. But the Rhema arises from the Logos. But the Logos is a whole lot more than what we put in bonded leather and print on rice paper. The Logos is that, again, which proceeds from God and gives all things their created reality. That's the wording that would have occurred to the Ephesians when John wrote to them in the city of Ephesus and said, in the beginning was the Logos, and the Logos was with God, and the Logos was God. They understood exactly what he was implying. He set off a whole detonation of revelations and understandings that don't occur to us unless we know where the book was written and to what people it was written to. Now, verse 1 stipulates Jesus is the Logos. Remember that the Logos is a philosophical term that was well known in Ephesus, where the Gospel of John was written. The philosopher Heraclitus coined the term Logos 600 years before Christ. He coined this term Logos to describe the first principle from which all matter and creation itself derives its existence. Now, if you're falling asleep on me, bear with me, because we're not presenting some sterile, impassionate theological concept. At the end of this teaching, you're going to see just how upfront and personal this understanding is to you and I on a moment-by-moment basis. It's the whole basis of our existence and the basis of the passion and the relationship that the Father wants to have with us. The Logos is said to be that which proceeds from God and gives all things their created reality. John goes a step forward again and takes this very well-known concept and declares that the sustaining foundation, the Logos was seen as that which sustains and maintains existence as we know it. And he is stipulating, he's postulating to these people, to this population in the city of Ephesus, that the sustaining foundation of the universe is not an impersonal force, but in fact is a self-existent personality we know of as God. The Greek philosophers were agnostic. They believed that God was, but they didn't necessarily believe he had a character or a personality or sentience, self-awareness like you and I do. He's going a step further. He says not only is God sentient, self-existent, and have a personality, his personality is that of Father, and he has extended himself into natural creation as the building block of projecting who and what we are on an ongoing basis. Now, what does it mean when he says that in the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God, but the same was in the beginning? What does it mean by beginning? Jesus, God, or the Logos, was in the beginning. The word beginning here, if you look it up in the original Greek word, it speaks not merely of a point in time, but rather a position in creation. Jesus, the Logos, positioned himself in the beginning. Now, what is that beginning? It's not just a point in time. It's something more fundamental to our moment-by-moment existence. Creation, from God's perspective, is not something he did 6,000 years ago. It's something he initiated 6,000 years ago and continues to do moment by moment. He never stopped creating. He finished the earth in 6 days, but he continues to sustain and maintain that which he finished as long as there is time, until time dissolves into eternity. Physicists have stumbled over things in their discipline that imply what John is passionately declaring. Physicists have observed quantum particles, which are the subatomic particles that make up all matter as we know it. They've observed that quantum particles blink into existence. They aren't just like if you take an apple and hold it in your hand. And it isn't just like something that came from a seed and it exists for a time and then it dissolves back into the earth. They've determined that the building blocks of the universe actually blink in and out of existence with a frequency not unlike the frequency wave of radio or television broadcasts. They blink in and out of existence. They are a probability amplitude, they are a wave, and then at some point they blink into a particle, and they blink in and out of a particle through a wave field. And that field is what they call the field of all possibility. They know that all matter arises moment by moment, blinking into existence at an incalculable frequency from a field that they call the field of all possibility. And they pursue the inquiry into the existence of that field through a study they call the theory of everything. So what is the beginning? Physicists, again, have observed quantum particles blink into existence and have pondered the field of energy, which they know these quantum particles that make up atoms and atoms which make up molecules and make up furniture and everything you and I know, that these particles blink into existence, and they question where do they go, because they come back, they had to go somewhere. They know they blink in and out at a frequency, therefore they have to be something in between those manifestations of particulate existence. Where does it go? They believe that particle physics, particulate matter arises from what they call the field of all possibilities, an energy field, and the study of it, the theory of everything. Now again, consider the Greek word that John used to describe the Logos. If Jesus is the Logos, and the Logos is God, then we understand that he positions himself in the past and in every given moment to be the ultimate underlying substance of all things. He is the undemonstrable and intangible source from which all things known and unknown spring into being and proceed from. Now, scientists insist that a thing that cannot be demonstrated cannot be studied as a science but falls under the discipline of religion, which they debunk. However, the field of all possibilities, which they deduce must exist, cannot be scientifically demonstrated. Science acknowledges that this field must exist. Everything they know points to the existence of this energy field out of which creation springs, not just 7,000 years ago or aeons ago, but it springs moment by moment, blinking in and out of existence in a frequency that's incalculable to measure. You ever read the scriptures? It talks about creation has a voice, that creation sings. There is a frequency which with all things vibrate, and they don't just vibrate in time, they actually vibrate in and out of existence, but they don't just cease to exist in between manifestations of particulate matter. They actually go somewhere, and where they go is back to the field of all possibility, this energy field out of which, of incalculable power, out of which everything you and I know and we ourselves arise from moment by moment by moment. Science acknowledges that it cannot study this field directly, they can only think about it. They cannot demonstrate it in any way. And isn't it interesting that the whole basis of the gospel is not to talk about something? Because if we're going to talk about something, we have to speak of the limited terms of time and history. But if we demonstrate something, then we're bringing God into the now. You cannot demonstrate something past tense. You cannot demonstrate it in future tense. The only way you can Paul said, I will only speak with the demonstration of the Spirit of God in power. The only way to demonstrate something is to demonstrate it in the now, in the direct attentiveness of the person to whom you're ministering. That's why Paul said, I will only, when he brought the gospel in demonstration of Spirit and of power. Philosophers for centuries have suggested that this unknowable energy that quantum theorists call the field of all possibilities must exist. It's not a new idea that Einstein and physicists in modern times have come up with. The expostulation that the field exists has been around for centuries. But the work of modern science has been to make the attempt to actually measure and even harness, sounds like the Tower of Babel, doesn't it? This field of energy from which all matter and the universe springs into being moment by moment, just like a transmitter transmits a radio wave. If they flip the switch and turn off the transmitter, the radio signal ceases to exist. God is the transmitter. He's the ultimate original substance. He is that which transmits not a impersonal radio wave, something as an impersonal radio wave. He actually transmits and extends himself into space and time as the building block of your existence and my existence and all that we know. This is the love of God. This is the intimate basis upon which he extends himself into us and wants to know us. As Paul said to the Athenians, and even to people that didn't even know him, he said, we're all children of God, and it's in him we live and we move and have our being. John draws upon the teachings of the ancient philosophers to flatly state that this field from which all things spring into existence is God himself. We exist, we cohere moment by moment, blinking into existence on a frequency of incalculable speed from the raw material of who God himself is. He allows this to happen as a means of exposing to us the reality of his existence, not only his existence, but also his love for us. So we totally agree with the quantum theorists. See, they understand. They can look under a microscope and they can observe molecules. They can look under an electron microscope and they can observe atoms and even somewhat measure the existence of protons and neutrons that make up atoms. And these things, molecules, atoms, protons, neutrons, nucleus of an atom, those are all particles. And they even understand, but cannot actually see, that even atoms themselves are made up of things like quarks, bosons, and so on and so forth. And all of these also are particles. Even light itself, they understand, is made up, it blinks into existence as a particle, but yet the power or energy of the existence of these things does not exist or lie inherently in their particulate existence, but they believe the energy that proceeds from the atom actually exists in a field in which all of the atoms and all the universe arises from. An energy field that is more of a wave, a probability amplitude, than it is a particulate, something that you could pick up and hold in your hand like grains of sand. What we propose is, yes, this is what John was talking about, the Logos. God is the Logos. Jesus is the Logos personified in humanity. And he is that which proceeds from God and gives all things their created reality, not just creating us through a sterile process 6,000 years ago, but actually creates us moment by moment as an extension of himself, as he places his scrutiny and attention upon us, where he said, he that touches you touches the apple of his eye. The very fact that you can hear the end of this sentence is because God actively, in his omnipotence, is actively extending his attention toward you to cause you to exist. Your very next split second of existence is a miracle. It's a creative act of God to cause you to exist. And it's not an act of God that's based on some sterile determination to bring you into existence, but it's a passionate act of love. He loves you so much that he sustains you, just as we could use the analogy of someone who's pumping somebody's chest to keep their heart beating so that they don't die. Except he's not pumping our chest with CPR, he's extending by an act of his will his energy, the energy of himself, not an impersonal energy, but an extension of his own person into us and through us to cause us to exist and have self-awareness. And because of the fall, self-awareness eclipses our God awareness. Adam and Eve didn't know they were naked until the fall, because their God consciousness before the fall eclipsed their self-consciousness. God did not create us merely for self-consciousness. He gave us a self-consciousness to be the context for our God consciousness, that we might enter into a love relationship with him. And just because man violated the covenant and chose self-consciousness over God consciousness, God did not withdraw himself, but he has continued through time and eternity in this envelope of human existence to extend himself moment by moment through an act of active scrutiny, allowing us to exist, as Paul said in Colossians chapter 1 verse 17, by him all things consist. So again, John draws upon the teachings of the ancient philosophers to flatly state that the field of energy from which all things spring into existence is God himself. And quantum theorists now agree with the philosophers that yes, there is a field of energy out of which all particulate matter, whether it's light, gravity, the strong interaction or the weak interaction, or electromagnetism, the particulate matter, the particulate nature of those four energies in the universe arise from an energy field that we propose is imbued with a personality of God, revealing himself to us as Father, not allowing us to, not being the occasion of our existence, but actually choosing to allow us to exist because of his love and his passion for us. So we exist and we cohere moment by moment, blinking into existence on a frequency of incalculable speed from the raw material of who God himself is. He allows this to happen as a means of exposing to us the reality of his existence, and not only his existence, but his love for us. So we have no argument with science that there is a quantum field that causes all matter and the universe to blink in and out of existence at an incredible rate. We simply maintain that this field is imbued with a sentience, with a character and personality known and revealed as a Judeo-Christian God who loved us and gave himself for us through Jesus on the cross. We exist and have ongoing existence because of the direct attenuation and the cosmic regard of God the Father at every given moment, lending us the raw material of his eternal self to give us existence on a moment, and consciousness, self-consciousness on a moment-by-moment basis. Not self-consciousness so that we may know ourselves and pursue our own agenda, but self-consciousness is the whole purpose of it was that it might be the context for God consciousness and entering into a relationship with him. The philosopher says, I think, ergo cogito sum. I think, therefore I am. The writer of the gospel implies in John 1:2, he thinks, therefore, no, he loves me, therefore I am. What John refers to as the beginning approximates what theoretical physics calls the unified field. In physics, the current thought is that the forces or powers that govern creation and existence do not reside independently in particles or objects. Rather, the thought is that all creation, again, springs into existence from an intermediate field. Beginning with Einstein, physicists have studied the four fundamental forces in creation and attempted to reconcile how they behave. They seek to reconcile these four forces, gravity, electromagnetism, the weak interaction, and the strong interaction, into a harmonious connection with the postulated existence of a unified field that all power and force and existence in the universe springs from. John's gospel implies that God himself is that holy grail that the scientists and quantum theorists can only think about. They can't even measure it, but they're in pursuit of it. In some circles, this pursuit or this inquiry has given rise to the theory known as the God molecule or the God particle. When John says, "In the beginning was the Logos," he is saying that in the beginning there was something from which all things proceed and have their created existence. That something, John declares, is in fact a manifestation of God himself, not a process God spun into existence to make us be on the earth, for humanity on the earth for 6,000 years, but it's an extension of himself. For God so loved that he gave. What did he give? He gave himself. He not only gave himself in Christ, he gave himself in creation, and he's giving himself still. It's his nature. He's giving now. He's giving now you the ability to have the self-awareness and the existence, nanosecond by nanosecond. You're blinking in and out of existence by a frequently. You are going to God and coming back to God. You're going to God and coming back to God, blinking in and out of existence, arising as a projection out of the unified field that is in fact an extension of God himself. So again, that's something that John declares is in fact a manifestation of God himself that he allows us to regard and observe from a position of self-consciousness as a means of establishing on his part communication and relationship with us. When John says the same was in the beginning with God, we have to know what he means by beginning. He is saying that the ultimate undefinable source of existence that causes all creation and men themselves to blink into existence moment by moment, that something is an extension and a manifestation of who God himself actually is. This tells us then that all creation, known and unknown, experienced and unexperienced, is a result of and manifestation of God himself extending himself upon creation as an act of loving stewardship of our moment-by-moment existence. The beginning of John 1:2 is not a point in time, but a moment-by-moment act of ongoing creation, held in place by the attenuation, by the attentive and constant scrutiny of God over every molecule and every atom, making up creation as we know it. In short, Colossians 1:17 sums it up this way: by him all things consist. We exist not as part of a sterile process of creative genius, but we exist as objects of the intense passion and love of the Father toward us in pursuit of relationship and fellowship with men. He didn't just merely create us. God has no sense of time, because time itself is a component of the material universe according to Einstein's theory of relativity. When Paul says, by him all things consist, he is saying, in effect, by him all things exist moment by moment, blinking in and out of existence, blinking into existence as a particle, returning instantly to the quantum field, to the field of all possibilities, the unified field, which is God, a manifestation of God himself. And then he, as an act of his will, causes you to then blink back into existence at an incalculable frequency of amazing speed as an act of his will, as an act of omnipotence and omniscience. It's his. You realize the omniscience of God. He's all-knowing, which means he has instantaneous, continuous regard of everything going on in the earth and in the universe at one time, and he has it in the forefront of his mind. Unlike us, we can only think about one thing at once. He's the infinite multitasker. God didn't just create us, He creates us moment by moment for His own pleasure because He loves us. Now, how do we know that He does this because He loves us? Look at the Greek word for consist in Colossians 1:17. It means to set together. When God created the earth, He was not creating a separation. He was creating a togetherness. When He took Eve out of Adam, He didn't create a unity. He created a separation so we would know what it was that He felt. A sense of separation and aloneness that He was remediating when He created man. That's why He describes the consummation of His plan of the ages of a bride and a bridegroom coming together. That Revelation chapter 12 describes a oneness, a unity, this longing for a relationship that was initiated when God took Eve out of Adam is a longing God imprinted there so we would understand His longing for fellowship with us as the bridegroom longing for his bride. He wants to come into relationship with us. And the word says, by Him all things consist. By Him all things consist. They come together. He allows us to blink into existence and then instantaneously takes Him back to Himself and hugs us and kisses us and then allows us to blink back into existence at an incalculable speed. This is the ministry of reconciliation that He wants to bring to a place of the ministry of redemption. As believers, we have the ministry of reconciliation, reconciling men's attenuation, reconciling men's attention to God, that they might have the opportunity to receive the redemption that He has made available. And that redemption is relational, it's passionate, it's loving. It's not some sterile process. Because the word consist means to stand with, to approve. Because He approves of you. He would rather have you in the earth, even though you may be in a sinful condition. He would rather have you in the earth than not have you at all. And because He sees that because of your existence, you're in a sinful condition, He sent Jesus to remediate even that so that you might come into a more perfect union with Him. Enoch walked with God and he blinked out of existence and he just didn't come back because of the love. I believe he hugged God back. He was blinking in and out of existence on the quantum field, and God was kissing him just like we kiss our children when they're asleep in their cribs. And he woke up and he put his arms around his papa and he just never came back. And one day you and I are going to blink out of existence in this earth time realm, and we're going to enter into the fullness of that quantum realm that God has created as an extension of Himself, that we can know Him and live in active, conscious intimacy, and our self-consciousness will be eclipsed by God consciousness and will become one with Him. Do you understand that your very existence is the result of a moment-by-moment conscious act of approval of God to project your being along the timeline of your life? Then you realize that every moment is an answer to a prayer that you haven't even prayed with. The fact that you exist moment by moment is the greatest miracle you could ever imagine. The fact that you're here because you're blinking in and out of existence by the sending of God, by the act of God. And if He gives you that miraculous existence moment by moment, how much more so when you pray, you're just simply asking the Father to intervene in a way measurable by you, that you can then be experienced His intervention. His intervention is there whether you experience it or not. That you could then experience that intervention as provision, benefit, blessing, and deliverance. So by Him all things consist. He is the Logos. He is the beginning. He is the inscrutable, unknowable source out of which you sprang to life and continue to live nanosecond by nanosecond. And He's wrapping you up in His love, and He would rather have you in the earth in your present condition than not have you at all. But He sent Jesus to cause you to see Him and to become like Him, that your God consciousness might eclipse self-consciousness, and the Edenic persona, the Edenic revelation and relationship with the Father would be restored. God bless you.